All right, sounds good. All right, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us today to our fireside chat with Metropolitan Mechanical Contractors. Um, so this is a conversation that we're really looking forward to. We have Corey Haggerty, who's the shop foreman at Metropolitan Mechanical Contractors, and Chris Holt, who's our senior account executive here at Novark Technology. So I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves quickly. So go ahead, Corey.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, so I'm the fab shop foreman for the pipe fitters side. So we deal with all the mechanical prefabrication needs from pretty much any of the foremen that we deal with. So I've been in this position for 7 years now. So
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. And Chris.
But yeah, my name is Chris Holt, Senior Account Executive. I take care of everyone, regarding Novark from, I would say, the whole northeastern quadrant of North America, from, Manitoba down to Kansas and across to the East Coast and all the way up into Newfoundland. So a large territory. And then for all the people that are on here, if I haven't met you yet, I look forward to meeting you in the future. A little background on me: I was a pro hockey player, as you can probably see up here, a bunch of old relics that used to contain my head. But I was a pro hockey player for 12 years, and I joined Novark about a year ago. So really enjoying it. Love the product, love the people, even Corey. He's a great guy to work with. So that's my background.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. All right. So we also have Joel Armstrong, who's our welding expert and product manager. So he's going to be joining us at the end for any Q&As as well. So just to do some housekeeping. So we'll have this session will be recorded. We'll be sending this recording to everybody that registered, and whoever didn't register, if you want to just email us, then we could freely send that recording to you. So we'll be going over 30 minutes of back and forth fireside chat with Corey and Chris. And at the end of the session, we'll be having a question and answer period where you guys have the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So let's get into the conversation. So today we'll be touching on some overarching themes, including fabrication operations inside the shop flow, market trends, what types of projects that MMC is doing, and integrating automation into the operation, the fabrication process. So let's zoom out a bit. That's what I like to do. So when we look at a construction project, like any type of high-rise, stadium, hospital, whatever it is, the mechanical systems are arguably the most important part. It's like if you look at a building like that compared to the human body, it's like the respiratory, digestive, circulatory system. It's important, which means that precision, productivity, quality is imperative. You got to make sure that your operations are efficient and you can really have a tight shop, right? And that's because that's what's putting these systems into these buildings. So very important stuff. So without further ado, let's get into the first topic. So we got, let's get right into the shop, like in terms of inside the shop and shop flow. So I'll let you guys kick it off there, and we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Yeah, Corey, again, you're with obviously MMC out of the Minneapolis area. Why don't you kind of take us through sort of an overview of what your shop is like, from your current setup and flow to just some of the, typical pipe sizes that you see coming through there, materials that you do. Just kind of give us maybe a quick overview of what things are like in there.
Sure. So as far as the shop flow part of it, we try to create like a chain link where it's just a smooth flow where it's coming in from one side of the shop, and at the tail end it's exiting out of the other with minimizing the cross flow of back and forth, minimizing handling. Safety is a significant part of like all of our thoughts and processes of how we do things. We try to make sure that you have overhead cranes in the areas where you're going to be handling the larger material. So, so on the side that the like all of our pipe and material comes in, um, that's like on the side where our 4-axis pipe cutting machine is at,
Hmm.
and pretty much everything is at the same elevation. So we have carts that are made to the same elevation as our cutting table. So after it's being cut and being prepared to be staged, you can just pull the pins out, roll the pipe right off in the cart, and stage your fittings with it thereafter. As soon as it makes it to the other side of the wall, which there is no crane between there, with the direction of the cranes, that's where the carts really come into play. And with the wheel locks on them too, it's that makes a really big difference to be able to minimize handling and make like our staging and everything really efficient to set the welders up, because as soon as it makes it to the other side of the wall, the welders are ready to roll. Everything has been cleaned, prepped, fittings are there, drawings are marked up. So there's a we try to focus on, or I do especially. I think it's really important to set it up on the front line, and then it's a lot cleaner on the tail end, to where if they understand what you're trying to tell them through like all the drawings, they can just build it with no questions.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
everybody's kind of in unison for that part of it. So we have, when it gets rolled off after, it's cut and prepped, it goes to our tack stations, which are 2 positioners,
Hmm.
and it's kind of spread out in another crane bay. Um, and basically what we do is I just kind of allow the welders to kind of figure out how they want to tack everything up, and then feed it over to the Novark assembly. We have 3 positioners on the Novark, which when we set it up, you kind of have to factor in the 30-foot circumference. So 15 foot from center, that arm can reach out and touch each individual area. So you kind of have to, think about, like, when we set up our 3 positioners, we wanted to make sure that we weren't handcuffing ourselves. So when you're welding one spool, you're not waiting for that crane. So we said, all right, let's do all the smaller bore on the kind of the exterior, where we plan to have more handling and stuff like that on that exterior side. And then we do the larger bore in the middle and the other side. Diameters, we see anything from, on average, 2 upwards to 30-inch diameter pipe. So primarily carbon steel. We do handle a little bit of stainless, and if and when we do, I would say 90% of the time it's going to be a Schedule 10 4 to 8 inch, and half of that time is where it overlays with the plumbers in this region, which is domestic water and that type of stuff. So they will come over and also use the Novark in those scenarios. After the Novark, like, so we got our tack station, Novark, and then after the Novark, we have our position weld booth. So the whole idea is to, after it's being rolled out, and there's any, say you have a longer arm that is coming off a main and you have to connect the dots, well, that's where you're going to take those 2 assemblies that need to be connected and and do your position welds on the tail end. Thereafter, it's going to be laid down, ready to be carted up, shipped, you know.
Hmm.
So that's kind of part of our process of the flow.
And that's changed, right? Because you had a different approach when you were attacking your spools, when you were all manual. Where I believe, if we talked about it, you used to kind of do it front to back, everything in one bay, where they were doing all the welds, all of the position stuff. Everything was kind of sort of one bay situation. So maybe talk about how Novark impacted that change from where you were, and if you could talk about kind of where you were before we got there to this new flow that's been more efficient for you.
Absolutely. So we're kind of unique in that scenario, to where there is not many shops that had done it the way that we did.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, I try to promote a higher skill set in here for the welders that are in here. Therefore, they can own it from start to finish. So when it was staged and sitting in their booth, as soon as they grab that one spool, if there's some outlets that are being stick welded or some rollout welds or position welds, they would build it from start to finish and then lay it down in our staging area. So what we had done was, with where we had all our rows of booths sitting in, we said, all right, this is going to be our tack station. And then now our shop revolves around the whole Novark platform. So that it's changed quite a bit. And it's not just your footprint and how you set things up. And you might hear me say this again like later, but truly it is a mindset, on how you handle your material and being in unison with the whole crew.
That's about yeah, and I mean, talking about your mindset and the attitude, maybe a little bit on, how some of your guys on the floor, including yourself and everybody that's involved, what is their sentiment towards having Novark in the shop, right? Is it something that they're supportive of? Is it something that they're excited to be working with? Talk about sort of that mentality side and how important that is in your shop to have good buy-in from the people on the floor, especially in a union shop like yourself.
That's a really good question. So from my personal perspective and my company's, I truly believe that retention is everything. Everyone knows your process, the type of systems that you're building, like Pete was saying, like really critical infrastructures that rely on you, that you can't have any failure. So it was difficult selling that to obtain the correct mindset, because right away, you get your good old boys or just people that just do not know. Their first thing that they say, well, that robot's going to replace people. And so I mean, you only know what you know, and you're going to repeat what others say. So I think there's something to be said with that. I honestly, in the beginning, it was tough to overcome it. I know, like, my crew in the background was talking about it and saying, God, I don't know if I really believe in this. Until Novark, we set it up, Novark came in for training, and we actually got our hands on it and kind of figured out our system, because what you think it is versus what it really is when you hit the ground, and start actually using it, are two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big pre-planner, so I like to try to envision what it's going to look like. And I got beat down a couple times in that scenario, like,
Yeah,
because
but
it
like
wasn't.
like you said, once it was in there and your guys are bought in, and that obviously Will and everybody that's in there, they love using it.
Mhm.
The big shift became, okay, here's what we did in the past, but now we have to really build this shop around having this weapon here. And from changing our booths to changing layout to whatever it was that you did. Maybe talk about some of those immediate transitions that you guys made in those early months to,
Yep.
quote unquote, build around it and make it the focal point.
So I think the biggest thing was holding people accountable, but also allowing the the folks on the floor to incorporate their ideas also,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a different perspective on how they're doing it, how they're building it. And I've been on the floor before welding and in those booths running it, so I do listen, and I like the feedback. Obviously, you can't take 100% of that, but there is great value in that.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest advantage to having the Novark is, how I said retention is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of really good hands in here, very skilled welders and or just pipe fitters in general. They're not just welders. They can go out in the field and do it all,
Mm-hmm.
start to finish. So we have a unique, well-versed group of people here. So it's that part's tough to overcome too, because you also have to be able to convince them otherwise of certain things too.
Yeah.
But I guess where I'm going with this is that, when you're physically welding in the booth all day, it's really hard on your body. You're standing and hovering over smoke bellowing out from that weld. That's hard on your eyes. You're constantly straining your far-sided muscles, if you will, looking at it very closely. And when you're running the foot pedal, you're standing on one foot constantly.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like playing a piano when you're trying to move that positioner and manipulate that pedal, where we, previous to this, did run hardwire. So when I seen this, it kind of got my attention. I was like, that's pretty slick, because if you go, like, I've been to other shops in the country, and I have an idea of what our competitors do, and they tend to run flux, which requires you to run opposite direction when you're
Right.
welding, and it's more complicated to run hardwire manually because the puddle doesn't solidify and freeze as quick. Sure, flux has its purposes where you have better coverage in certain areas, but it's easier to teach and easier to weld in general, for the majority of what you do. So currently what we do with, say, the folks in the shop is, at first I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rotate, say Will is going to be in the tack booth on Monday, and then Tuesday you're going to the Novark. Wednesday you're going to positions, and never put one person in one area the whole time.
Yeah.
And it took a while for that whole flow to kind of catch up, and for some of the guys in the tack stations to communicate with the guys in the Novark and say, hey, we need to tweak this a little bit, make a fine adjustment here, and these are the things, like,
Right.
even down to our gaps at the tail end. What I determined was, on my layout on the setup pre to it going through that whole flow, was 6-inch and under. We do a 16th inch gap, 8-inch and above, 1/8 inch. That's it for our gap.
Yeah.
So
you touched on something that I think is such a misconception out there, and that is, well, number one, getting buy-in from the floor. It's becoming so vital, and we're learning that at Novark, that we're not just having discussions with true end decision makers in the office, right? It's important to have these discussions with people like yourself, the people like Will on the floor, people like, everyone that's out there actually welding, because a misconception when you think about robotics or when you think about automation in the world is that, like you touched on, this is coming in to replace me. All of my great skill and all of the skill that you have in that shop, everyone's afraid that if we put this in here, it's all wasted. What did I do it all for? But what is really unique about Novark, and what really changes the mind of the people on the floor almost instantly, like you said, when you get your hands on it and you realize that this isn't like some orbital welder that we just stick on there and hit go and hope it goes well. There's so much control aspect of that people like Will and the other guys that you have out there, they're able to use the skill that they've acquired over so many years of welding, because I think of it like, when you go and get a surgery, and now they're using a robot to perform it just at a higher skill level, better efficiency, better accuracy, better quality. It's still the doctor using the robot. It's still the doctor using their skill. It's still them using their eyes and their ears and the senses that they've evolved and learned over their growth as a welder. They're still utilizing that and taking advantage of the control aspect you have with Novark, right? And a great example of that is I brought a prospect up there to see you guys, and Will was on the Novark demonstrating what it could do. And I asked her, I said, isn't that positioner going really fast? Isn't it going faster? And you go, yeah, well, he likes to mess around with it. He's able to push himself, and he's able to use his skills to push the rope, be able to go faster, or however he feels is going to be best to obtain a quality weld in that environment. So all of that skill that you have with Novark, it doesn't go to waste. You're able to
No.
take it and put it into the welding. Even you're just using a better weapon to execute it. That's easier on the body. It's safer to use. And again, they just get to, you still get to be a welder even though it's in there. So is that something that you saw with the guys once they actually got their hands on it?
Absolutely. I mean, sure, it didn't happen overnight,
Right.
but like as a welder, like in here or in this region, um, I think just in general,
Mm-hmm.
it's natural to be competitive
Right.
and to say, hey, I know I can do better and faster than you, and that is what makes you better is because you're always looking for that edge to push the limits with obtaining quality at the same token. You know, like you have to hit both ends. So I think you're spot on. The biggest thing in the beginning, it was kind of being sold to me, you know, from the other direction too. Well, we could probably have apprentices do this and, you know, X, Y, and Z. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, for helping assist, like feed it when we're extremely busy, that's not a bad option. And I'll touch base on that in a second. But once we got our feet planted, I would say 2 weeks into it, then we started figuring things out like, hey, this is the sequence of how you should tack it. And then we came up with better ways to overcome always loading it in the positioner and making sure that your pipe was aligned so you don't have to override your controls as much. And it also goes back to trusting what the platform is handed to you. That's your baseline. Like Novark is not telling you you have to use this,
Mm-hmm.
but you probably shouldn't steer too far outside of those parameters. Like you could
Yeah.
tell me otherwise and we can compare notes. That's great. But I what I really like about Novark is that there's some really good welders that have been like hands-on developing this, writing the programs, and they haven't stopped improving. Like
Mm-hmm.
they listen and take all that feedback. So, you know, like some of these you could compare it to maybe some of your other competitors. I don't know, but I would assume that, you know, once they write the parameters and set those
Mm-hmm.
programs, it's set. Where
Yeah.
you guys are always like on it and looking for improvements. And like my platform is fairly new, but I know there's still been some adjustments, improvements, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, so everybody's like does a full circle there and communicates very well.
Yeah, that's a good segue into kind of the relationship side of this, right? Like there isn't just when you're part of the Novark family and you can talk about this. This isn't a we're going to drop it off and teach you how to use it and say, you
Mhm.
know, best of luck to you. You know, how much did you look into and how important to you is really the relationship side and feeling like you're kind of part of this Novark family with anything from continued development to support to, you know, even working with yours truly, which is I know is a treat for you. Um,
Absolutely.
but maybe touch a little bit about on the relationship side and how what's your opinion on how that's gone and just everything involved with that.
Um, Honestly, you guys have some of the best customer service I've ever dealt with, and I deal with a lot of different people. You know, with the volume of um, things that we fabricate, like the business that we do, we're a very significant size here in the metro. Um, and and honestly, like just from the starting point when I personally needed to like run the machine, understand it, to believe in it. So when I
Mm-hmm.
went down to FabTech 2 years ago, that's where the relations and where I started to see that, like I was saying, these guys are legitimately welders. They're not just blowing
Mm-hmm.
smoke. Like they do know what they're talking about. And if you've been in the industry and you have a significant background, you can pretty much pinpoint that by having just a general conversation. I don't have to say, Chris, let me see you run a weld to understand that.
You
Even
might
though
not. You might not want to with me, Corey.
well, you're a sponge. You could just make it seem like so that would be pretty good. But as far as like the customer service end, it is phenomenal. Like I can't tell you, like I've had the majority of the issues that I've had is our fault. Like a piece of pipe drops on the foot pedal and that breaks. We get it next day overnighted, and we have in-house electricians, so we were able to, have that machine up and running next day. So, and if it was something more minor where it's just kind of annoying, like while you're running it, then one thing that I understood in the beginning was that in the background of how you guys deal with your issues is you prioritize per, are you up and running, or is this like kind of on that annoying, like I can get by and still run it, but maybe my camera is slightly calibrated so my view is looking at it, on the side a little bit or something like that, where they're not obviously not going to forget about you, but
Right.
What I've noticed is when you're down and out, they take care of you right away with, what, like, it's not like you guys have all the parts right there in Vancouver, right? So
we try,
if it's
we
an
try to.
outsource,
We try to, but
the
it's
rest
not
of
always
it,
as easy.
the rest of it's in your basement behind those hockey hoods.
It is, yeah. I have a stock room back here. But that's a good point, and I think it's important that we want to make sure that as being part of this family, if for whatever reason, and I know it's rare, but for whatever reason, if you do have a situation where you're down and out, right? Like the machine is down, like that's money that's coming out of your pocket, and that makes you the highest priority fix for us right now. If you, like you said, if you have some small tweak here, or a little knob broke off because you slammed something into it, but you're still operational, we're obviously still going to address your situation. But if somebody's down, it's just like if you were on the battlefield, right? Like if you're going to treat your most serious wounds immediately and efficiently. And so that's great to hear, and that's great feedback for our guys. Let's shift really quick, and I know these 30 minutes get eaten up real quick, but let's shift really quick because I want to touch on something that we're seeing, which is obviously a huge influx of just general strategy, as much as possible being moved from the field into prefabrication. As much as the projects can be done inside, out of the elements, that seems to be the trend that everything is going. Are you seeing that, and how vital is having something like Novark to increasing the shop work versus the field work?
Well, the prefabrication is actually sometimes a make or break deal with us obtaining jobs, especially these jobs that are extremely busy, where you have people tripping over each other. All the trades are working right on top of each other, and it tends to not become friendly, with what you're dealing with. What we at MMC have been doing recently is just doing more of a preliminary with helping with the design and getting involved with the GC before the job has been even awarded to us,
right?
Which has basically, if we were up against somebody that was not prefabbing and us fabbing, we're more likely to get the job. With like we do modular racks that are like a combined, med gas type plumbing and domestic water with our heating, chilled water type stuff. But as far as the Novark, you cannot match the quality. Like I was saying, being competitive, I don't know about you, but whatever your competitive nature is, like everything that you do, I know I'm comparing notes to my weld next to the other guys. You're watching the times and doing this stuff where, after 6 hours of having your arm up and trying to manipulate and do things, you're going to become fatigued. That machine does not become fatigued. It doesn't call in hungover or sick.
Right.
It's there every day. It's consistent. It's solid. and you just can't beat the quality.
And that
So
has to make you more competitive.
yes,
Obviously, when you're making your bids, not only from being able to expedite turnaround times and stuff versus your competition, but just the ability to bring that in-house and offer that prefab side. Like you said, it's going to make you more of a force to be reckoned with in your area, as well as what we're seeing now. You know, as I've gone to, 30, 40 shops now, I continue to hear that the jobs and the competition that you used to maybe have is not even so regional to you anymore, right? There's companies in California doing work for the Midwest. There's companies maybe in Minnesota doing work for the South. So you need to not even just compete locally in your area around your, what would be your more familiar competitors, but being able to ramp up that prefabrication side of your business, it's going to allow you to compete outside of really your tri-state area, because you're now competing on a national level for a lot of these big jobs. So how vital has Novark been to your ability to compete, or maybe even allowed you to throw the MMC hat into potential jobs that maybe in the past you just didn't have the capacity to do?
well, we're kind of on the leading edge of that. We're talking about doing some out of town jobs with our sister companies where we'll potentially be doing the prefab and they'll be on site doing the installs. So it'd be kind of paired up with, like, we have sister companies kind of in the surrounding areas that we are working on doing more shared services just across the board. Everything that you do, you work together on the whole deal. So
Right.
that's a huge selling point, because one guy might be able to offer, design on one area, and then the other guy has a strong suit in another area. And if you can combine those, it definitely puts you in the wheelhouse for obtaining those specific jobs easier. And one thing that I would like to say too is that, like, per what we're talking about here, is when you have X-ray welds, like, I don't know, recently the jobs that I've had have been 10% X-ray.
Okay.
But when you do, and you can say, versus what I had done in the old system was just have an Excel spreadsheet that would tie into the spool drawings with the weld names, numbers, what type of weld it was, all the things. Now I can attach a video that ties into that weld map, and it just looks so professional.
Right.
And if you did have an issue, you can go back to that video and dissect down to, on the clock, where you were at on that pipe, and what that issue was. And I'll bet you my bottom dollar, the issue was, more than 90% of the time, it's on your tacking.
Sure. So that's a good segue.
And set it up.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. I mean, the ability and what we're seeing from a lot of our customers like yourself, utilizing that video is moved from even just being a QA QC tool, but it's also now morphed its way into becoming an internal training tool. Being able to teach new operators and new welders to come in and watch these videos, just like a sports team would watch film on their game. They don't have to go out and play another game or recreate it in the practice. They're able to just watch the film of a particular weld, find an issue. And then another one that we're finding too that's been very, very interesting, and another just great value add out of nowhere, is what we're seeing is the sales teams at these companies are taking these videos as part of their bids, because they're bidding very aggressive turnarounds and aggressive quality, claims that they're making on these bids. But to be able to have the video right there to back that up and say, this is the process we use, here's the evidence of us doing the weld that you're going to require and the quality that you get, it's very, very powerful. So before we get into the question and answer period, because we're already up here at 12:30, I want you to maybe just touch on in sort of conclusion, just sort of what you have found when implementing this kind of technology. What have been really some of those keys to success? Like you mentioned fit, but just in general, some of the things that you find would really breed success in the next, person that adopts this.
I would say focusing on your setup, make sure that your shop revolves around this, trust it and use it. put yourself in those uncomfortable positions to learn how to use it. Like when we first got it, we had significant gaps with the knife edge, and we blow through because the operator didn't understand, hey, you need to accelerate your positioner speed and maybe manipulate a little bit more, turn up your amplitude, whatever that scenario was. So a lot of it's just mindset. And then listen to the guys on the floor and try to understand that. So, I mean, because I have a different perspective than the guys on the floor every day. So I think just, understanding that and being willing to change a little bit, and knowing that whatever your vision is in the beginning, that is not how it's going to be at the tail end. Be flexible.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Being able to objectively be open to constantly evaluating, constantly, checking and seeing how things are going. Like you said, listening to the guys on the floor. So many of our customers have, come into Novark by having, 2 or 3 positioners out of the gate. And very quickly, if they're open to really seeing what's going on, it evolves to becoming a 4 positioner or a 5 positioner situation, just based on the work that they're doing and hearing from the guys, hey, we could be going faster. We could be doing better here. And that's such a great story that it often does evolve and sort of morph itself into a different animal once you have the weapon in the shop. It's really taking that, weekly stock of where are we and where can we continue to improve. And it's great to hear that Novark is giving you the flexibility to do that, and that we got a great team behind us helping you with it.
I think one of our hurdles, like leading into it, was not having enough work to feed the Novark. So prime the pump, like have a pile of stuff tacked, ready to feed that Novark, because it goes so much faster than you envision that it would.
Right.
Like, sure, there's going to be a little bit of handling with the positioner, chucking it up and doing all this stuff. But if you do not plan ahead and preload that heavy, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah. There's definitely a flow element to that. And I think even as reps and us on the Novark side, we've, as we're building, I believe now our 100th unit, we're starting to get that education now, even from my side, from having these conversations with people like yourself and our other customers out in the field, where we're now starting to be able to really help advise these new companies coming in on, hey, here's some things you really need to consider and really need to look at if you want to be able to hit, the goals that you have envisioned in your mind. There's some pieces that you're going to need to consider that are going to need to be in place for you to do that, to really ensure the success. But a great way to kind of move into, I think, Pete, we're here at 1240, some of the questions that we have, and because we kind of get into the nitty gritty of what the Novark does and kind of the flow, maybe we can, Melissa or whoever, get into some of these questions that we've got for Corey, and I'll help answer obviously as best as I can. So if we can maybe get into some of those, that's probably a good time to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good segue. So thanks a lot, guys. A lot of good info there. So we're open now for the question and answer period. So whoever wants can go ahead. But we'll have some coming in, and so I have one here. So, Corey, how many diameter weld inches of carbon steel sked on average would be completed on 8-hour shift?
Okay, so
standard.
Yep, on average, I would say 200 to 240 weld inches. But when we get into larger diameter pipe or longer headers, where you can just have it all tacked up, where you just run down and weld.
Yeah.
Then it really increases your numbers. So our max is 350.
350 in one shift?
Yes, 8-hour shift.
Fantastic. Yeah,
and,
that's fantastic.
Obviously you have breaks and, stretching in the morning, and like you're not walking right over to it and hitting start.
Right.
And that was actually not having anyone load it for him. He did it on his own.
Really?
Yeah. The guys, the guys were placing side bets on it.
Maybe that's a good, that's a good piece to touch on, is kind of, if you want to be as efficient as you can, and obviously depending on how many positioners you have integrated, right? If you have fewer positioners going, you're going to need more hands involved in keeping it fed, right? If you've got 3 or 4 going, your operator or somebody may have some more time where you're going to be able to do that. So, I think it is important to touch on the fact that it isn't just necessarily a one operator versus your old one manual welder, right? It kind of is a team of people, from the necessary amount of guys that you got fitting, to having, maybe if you have the personnel, somebody to help load and keep those what I call the bullet chambers loaded with bullets, because like you said, the Novark is going so quick from joint to joint. Or maybe if you've only got 2 to do on that particular spool in positioner number 1, you're swinging over and you're welding again in 2 minutes on the next positioner.
Yep.
If you're doing small bore stuff, it's going to be a quick change out on that first positioner. So all these kind of things are great to consider when you're thinking about your project, or you're thinking about the work that you typically do for that. So go ahead, Pete, with another question.
Awesome. Yeah. Next one. Have you freed up space in your workshop due to reducing the amount of welding bays now required?
Yeah, which has become our laydown bay for priming the pump and having everything packed up, and with it going in and out so fast, I have a larger laydown area too, for setting it up for shipping it out too. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Awesome. We got one coming in here from David. Where were your shop flow bottlenecks before the Novark, and where are they now that you have it?
I would say the bottlenecks were when we got into specialty entities, and it wasn't just, kind of similar spools that you're building and running it redundantly, even though they're slightly different. Where that has become more fluent because of the Novark. Currently, our bottleneck is when we have less welded pipe and it's all grooved in thread-a-less. That is one of my unforeseen bottlenecks that I had. So when I see that coming, I actually will set up other makeshift booths and bring more guys in to make sure that I'm still feeding the Novark and running the other type of work.
Yeah,
for sure. Next one. So how accurate does this set need to be, allowing for poor fit up and poor fittings?
The better it is, the faster it's going to go.
Yeah,
the more
that's what we've seen.
The better your weld is going to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, you cannot control what Chinese fittings are going to look like, or like foreign. I should just say foreign fittings.
Yeah.
They come from different areas, but they tend to be out around. I'm a big proponent of using domestic pipe on everything that we do. That's just our shop standard.
Yeah.
But as far as your fit up, you're going to be required to manipulate and have to overcome more things as an operator if it's not perfectly straight in that positioner and it's walking a little bit. If your high-low is off a little bit, you might have to, preset some background settings off of those recipes to, say, dwell on your low side, and then your attacker has to. If you put the time on the front line, it'll pay dividends on the tail end.
Yeah, definitely.
And even from a quality perspective too, right? Especially if you're doing a lot of X-ray work, right? We're finding that if you're willing to just spend a little extra diligence and really ingrain that as part of your culture in your shop, of doing the very best that you can to maximize that fit as close to what we hope to achieve as possible. Like you said, it's going to be making the operator's job a lot easier. They'll have to make far fewer adjustments that they see coming around. But also from a quality perspective, right? This is it's a machine that really doesn't know how to miss if you have a good quality fit, and a good example of that is we have a customer down in Texas who's done their last 15,000 welds with no X-ray fail. once they really nailed and had the guys be diligent on their fitting. Even if it takes an extra 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to get that where it needs to be and be high quality, you're going to make that up in droves on the back end. So that's a great answer, Corey.
100%. That's also why I'm a proponent of rotating the guys and not burning somebody out on the tack station. Like, if
we're running a little late, but if you guys don't mind, we'll keep it going. We got some more coming in. So
keep it going.
Have you seen a reduction of use of mechanical joint connection and clamp connections?
With larger bore, yes.
Okay. How many guys do you typically have in the shop from cutting to finished weld to obtain 200 inches a day? That's coming in from Sean.
Typically, I have 4 welders, 1 guy prepping, and myself. Not including other random tasks. Therefore, our crew will fluctuate.
Awesome. Okay. Did you mechanical layout change with the Novark from a design standpoint?
Only with that weld gap that I was talking about in the beginning with Chris.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I like this. We got like
there's a good one.
Fire.
Have you welded stainless steel pipe, and how valuable has it been to have a second torch?
It is worth its weight in gold. I'm really glad that we have it. We don't use it all the time, but when we do it, sometimes we have the plumbers come over and weld some of their domestic pipe or random stuff. We do a lot of condenser water. So once we figured out, all right, let's change our tack setup. Like we kind of changed everything. And I have a huge background in TIG welding, and that thing will blow me out of the water every day, any day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
it is phenomenal.
We got a hot one here. Okay, so what failure rate have you had after NDT since using the SWR?
I haven't had a significant amount of tests, with only 2 jobs being 10% X-ray. I would say 0.
Awesome.
0. Can't argue with 0, Corey.
No.
What else you got up there, Pete?
Well, we got one more here. Are there any hidden time delays that you have encountered that you did not expect?
I would say the biggest one is the when I didn't have all butt welds, where it was like redolets and random other things that did not feed the Novark. And those are just things out of your control per what your company is selling.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do those ones by hand for sure.
Oh, Scott's coming in here. Do you back purge stainless pipe welds?
Not on condenser water, but more critical systems, yes.
Yeah, and for Novark has recipes for both, purge and non-purge. I think you're always going to be able to get a better quality stuff when you're doing purge.
And and if it's open, we actually have a jig set up where you don't have to purge the whole thing.
Yeah. So we've got customers, just so everyone knows, we got customers that are both purging and non-purging, depending on the work that they're doing. So we're there to kind of help you with all of that, and depends on what you have going on.
Awesome. Well, let's close it out. Well, thanks so much, guys. Chris, Corey, you guys are a wealth of knowledge in this space. So really, so thank you so much, Corey, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you guys have done, MMC has done some incredible projects, big stadiums and data centers and everything. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are doing coming down the pipe. So thanks a lot for everyone watching. We'll be sending a recording of this session to everybody. And if you have any questions at all, any other questions we couldn't get to, feel free to email us and we will get back to you.
And another thing too, really quick before we sign it off, and again, a huge thank you to Corey, but one thing I want to make sure everyone knows out there who's either considering, working with Novark or even is already working with Novark, we have such a great group of existing customers like Corey and of existing family members who make themselves available when they can to have these kind of talks and share this kind of knowledge. We've developed a fantastic network of family members here. And so I'm sure Corey has always been able to make himself available for not only talking with us and our development team and everything from that end, but from also being willing to open himself up and talk about his experience with us to any new and prospective customers. We have a fantastic network. So again, thank you, Corey, so much for being available. And for anybody out there who maybe would like to reach out to Corey or have more of a side conversation than we had today, he's always available and willing to do that, as well as so many other of our partners. So thanks
Absolutely.
again.
I enjoy talking about the Novark. You guys have a great platform. So
Well, thank you guys so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
thanks, Pete. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.